Chapter 11: Central Nervous System Diseases of Stroke, Neurodegeneration, and Aging. From an evolutionary viewpoint, aging is a biologic novelty. Human evolution is based on success at reproduction, not a long lifespan. Aging has become society's most troubling burden, an issue revealed through the explosive growth of neurodegenerative disorders in the last 120 years. Sadly, my profession does not seem to appreciate the genesis of neurodegenerative disorders and has no answers to curb their prevalence. Evolution selects for optimal reproduction. Longevity is not its focus. As scientist Peter Gluckman pointed out, survival later in life will be less strongly selected, and thus selection may have compromised health in middle and old age. Consequently, the EPI-PALEO RX needs to be mindful of this perspective, as what was best for us in our younger years might be detrimental as we age. We do not know this to be true as of yet, but our Neolithic minds need to account for this possible pitfall of aging. We know normal aging increases inflammation, which is correlated with lower conversion of LDL cholesterol to pregnenolone. Low pregnenolone is one of the most common responses we see in aging. This conversion requires vitamin A and the thyroid hormone T3, and we lose the ability to make T3 from T4 first in the gut, and then in our cells. As we age, we also may notice our LDL levels rise. This, too, is a sign to check for declining pregnenolone. If we find these things together, the best treatment is to add a small dose of T3 to our daily regimen of medications to offset the loss. One reason we see atherosclerosis increase as we age is because we cannot convert LDL cholesterol to patch the inside of damaged arteries. When conversion rates fall, the cholesterol might stay in our plasma too long and eventually become oxidized, making it a source of atherosclerosis. The small density LDL is profoundly susceptible to this type of reaction. This is why a Paleolithic diet helps mitigate the risks of aging. It is low in foods that generate inflammation and toxicity, thus lowering the risk of arterial disease. The diet is also very high in L-carnosine, which has been shown to increase telomere lengths. If you can keep inflammation low, thus preserving mitochondrial integrity, you have an opportunity to increase your lifespan just by altering your diet. Does Linktr and IGF-1 activation always shorten lifespan with the EPI-PALEO RX? Most longevity research points to decreased lifespan when the two nutrient growth pathways are activated. Those two pathways are mTOR and IGF-1 pathways. The key point is that these studies were performed on older people who had higher levels of inflammation because of their age and their standard diets. Therefore, conclusions made from these studies cannot be generalized to humans who alter their diets. Inflammation is at the seed of aging. Telomere biology shows their lengths are directly tied to the efficiency and integrity of mitochondria, the energy factories in our cells. Much about the Paleolithic diet favors longevity. A longitudinal study, a study of repeated observations over a long period of time, needs to be done because I believe it may show that activating mTOR with high-protein and high-fat diets and increasing IGF-1 levels with protein and carbohydrates may not hurt our longevity, as the research says it might. This is a very real hole in our current science. We do not know this answer, and therefore, I default to what evolutionary biology tells us. Our knowledge to date says telomere lengths determine cellular fate and the aging process. Shortened telomere lengths in organs correspond to organ degeneration and failure. It's clear the human telomere is our best measuring stick for therapeutic interventions, and the Paleolithic diet has the most advantages for reduced aging and Neolithic disease. The incidences of the diseases we discuss in this chapter rise as humans enter middle age. With diseases of the brain, heart, and arterial tree, it may be beneficial to favor fats, specifically medium-chain triglycerides, MCTs. The common tie between heart disease, atherosclerosis, hardening of the arteries, and neurodegenerative diseases, such as Alzheimer's, is the advanced aging of arteries and poor blood flow to the organs. Most doctors also advocate the use of statins and warfarin, Coumadin, without any good science to support them. These drugs alter neurons to cause major problems in cognition and allow for calcification of arterial walls. Conventional wisdom advice for strokes: you need to pay attention to your lipids. Eat a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet and take your statins and blood pressure medications. I think we will put you on some kind of blood thinner like Coumadin or Pradaxa. You need to exercise more and stop being a lazy slug. People with severe atherosclerosis may have elevated LPA particle sizes too. EPI-PALEO RX for strokes. Eat a diet opposite of conventional wisdom advice. This would be a Paleolithic diet laden with MCT oils. You would also be wise to eat carbohydrates low in the glycemic index to keep your particle size large and fluffy. You want to keep your hsCRP as close to zero as possible and your vitamin D levels up. You should not supplement with calcium, and you should eat foods high in vitamin K2 or supplement with it. A Paleolithic diet is the best way for you to limit your risks from all strokes. There are many kinds of strokes, and some have some key features that alter our view of them. A. Strokes from atherosclerosis and poor blood flow are called ischemic intracranial disease. These need aggressive vitamin K2 replacement and optimization of the sex hormones. If your TSH is high, you would be wise to try to get it between 0.5 to 2.0. You also want to keep your insulin level below 2 and begin an exercise program. B. Hemorrhagic strokes are caused by weakened and calcified vessels in certain parts of the brain. The best treatment is the addition of high-dose vitamin K2 to your ketogenic Paleolithic diet. Control of your blood pressure is important here, too. C. Amyloid angiopathy is a brain disorder tied to altered lipid metabolism that leads to fragility of the supporting elements of the brain. These people are susceptible to blood clots in the brain and must eat a strict ketogenic diet high in MCTs, and they must monitor strokes, and some have some key features that alter our view of them. A. Strokes from atherosclerosis and poor blood flow are called ischemic intracranial disease. These need aggressive vitamin K2 replacement and optimization of the sex hormones. If your TSH is high, you would be wise to try to get it between 0.5 to 2.0. You also want to keep your insulin level below 2 and begin an exercise program. B. Hemorrhagic strokes are caused by weakened and calcified vessels in certain parts of the brain. The best treatment is the addition of high-dose vitamin K2 to your ketogenic Paleolithic diet. Control of your blood pressure is important here, too. C. Amyloid angiopathy is a brain disorder tied to altered lipid metabolism that leads to fragility of the supporting elements of the brain. These people are susceptible to blood clots in the brain and must eat a strict ketogenic diet high in MCTs, and they must monitor their blood pressure closely. This disorder is often seen with Alzheimer's disease. D. Subarachnoid hemorrhages are due to ballooning of cerebral vessels at their branch points in the brain. These tend to occur much earlier in life and are deadly. No one really knows the cause, but they are associated with changes in the vessel wall, and many believe they are tied to a genetic predisposition. I believe these people can remodel their vessels with high-dose B vitamins, magnesium supplementation, vitamin D3 supplementation, high-dose vitamin K2 supplementation, and maximizing a reduced serum plasma. There is no good proof for this advice because it is not well studied, but all these maneuvers support optimal arterial wall functioning. Limiting PFAS and trans fats is critical to avoid weak arterial walls. Alzheimer's disease. Conventional wisdom advice for Alzheimer's. Many believe Alzheimer's is a genetic disease. Most people are not sure of the cause. EPI-PALEO RX for Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's disease is a nutritional disease with inflammation at its foundation. You need to eat a complete ketogenic diet loaded in MCT oils and coconut oils. Carbohydrate intake for Alzheimer's has to be the lowest of any diet. These diet changes are critical for success. Of course, the best treatment is prevention by eating well before you get the disease. Diabetics are at a massive risk for developing Alzheimer's disease, which is why rates of Alzheimer's have exploded. The rates of diabetes have exploded, too. The Alzheimer's disease chain of evidence for causation, genes or epigenetics. The recent announcements about the potential causes of Alzheimer's disease have gained a lot of attention, but what most caught my eye was information about genes tied to lipid metabolism and inflammation. The Alzheimer's jigsaw puzzle is a long way from complete, but emerging information suggests inflammation is the root cause of this condition, and that inflammation is tied to diet. What exactly are those pieces of evidence? One, insoluble plaques inside neurons made of a protein called amyloid beta cause Alzheimer's. These proteins accumulate over time, blocking normal brain signal transmissions and molecule transfers. During this time, the brain becomes susceptible to hemorrhages. As the amyloid proteins accumulate, tau proteins also accumulate, and the two interact chemically to form an insoluble protein called a neurofibrillary tangle, which is classically associated with many neurodegenerative diseases. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and mad cow disease are a few. 2. Researchers and clinicians believe your risk of getting Alzheimer's rises dramatically if you carry the APOE gene. It appears it raises your risk of atherosclerosis, too. In fact, having 2 copies of the allele raises your risk of developing Alzheimer's 20-fold before the age of 75. APOE removes the buildup of amyloid beta and tau proteins before they damage brain cells in a process called apoptosis. Alzheimer's increases apoptosis, slowly destroying the brain. Protein folding is a process by which the protein assumes its shape. Diseases such as Alzheimer's are believed to be due to protein misfolding. The solubility of proteins determines how they fold. If the protein folds incorrectly, it becomes less soluble. This is why we can visualize tangles under a microscope. Ironically, this points to the presence of APOE gene being very positive, more proof that genetic determinism is not as important as epigenetics. 3. The third bit of evidence comes from Chris Dobson's lab at Cambridge University in England. Dobson made 17 small genetic adjustments to the amyloid beta protein in his lab to make it either more or less soluble. After doing this, he then transferred these genetically altered proteins into the DNA of fruit flies, proving less soluble proteins resulted in shorter-lived flies. So after this experiment, neuroscientists began to ask, why do misfolded proteins show up in elderly brains to begin with? For it appears all neurons have internal quality control mechanisms that not only detect misfolded proteins, but also prevent misfolding from happening. Research published in March 2011 from Brown University showed that both parts of this mechanism, the detector and refolder, are functional in diseased brains, but the process is overwhelmed by neurodegenerative changes. Basically, they cannot sustain the maintenance workload of all the amyloid beta proteins being made. 5. The fifth bit of evidence came in April 2011 from Jeffrey Kelly, PhD, at the Scripps Research Institute. Kelly found a chemical forms when cholesterol reacts with ozone. Ozone is a reactive form of oxygen. We refer to it as a free radical. The ozone then attaches to amyloid beta proteins and makes misfolding hundreds of times more likely. Kelly found the ozone came from inflammation generated within the neurons. They linked the etiology of protein misfolding directly to carbohydrate and omega-6 in the diet, both of which are known to create inflammation. It also tightly links diabetes with Alzheimer's. 6. The last bit of evidence comes from the recent studies on stress and the development of neurodegenerative diseases due to the hormone cortisol. We know that leptin resistance causes diabetes. Chronic leptin resistance progresses to insulin resistance and eventually to adrenal resistance, in which insulin and cortisol are chronically elevated. Chronic cortisol elevation is associated with inflammation. Cortisol is made from pregnenolone. In 2011, work done at the University of California, Irvine pointed to the elevation of cortisol as the main generator of inflammation in diseased neurons. This is what fuels the rise of ozone in the diseased brains of Alzheimer's victims. The elevated cortisol also fuels more protein misfolding, overwhelming the detector and refolding mechanisms in the brain. This accelerates as the disease progresses, and is why we see neurologic decline when the brain is fueled consistently by carbohydrates and PFAS. Based upon this evidence, we can see this is not a genetic disease, but a nutritional disease. The major problem in neurons is the misfolding protein. Because of this, Alzheimer's is now classified as a proteopathy. A proteopathy is a disease of misfolded proteins. It appears that Alzheimer's disease is caused by several key factors that appear in unison. The first finding is that people with Alzheimer's have an extreme lack of lipids in the brain, particularly omega-3 fats. It appears the brain needs 25 to 35% of the omega, 3-fat DHA to function optimally. We also see upregulation of the IGF-1 pathways and dysregulation of protein signaling, both of which lead to faulty protein folding in the Alzheimer's brain. We used to think Alzheimer's was due to tau proteins causing neurofibrillary tangles, but it is becoming clear the real issue is the remnants of faulty protein folding causing non-functional neurons. The neurons containing these misfolded proteins are toxic and therefore undergo apoptosis. As the process progresses, the brain's stem cell supply in the temporal, parietal, and frontal lobes becomes exhausted. It appears this pathologic process uses up the brain's cholesterol stores to make the cortisol fueling the inflammation. So Alzheimer's results in a cholesterol deficiency in the brain. It is no wonder Alzheimer's is growing like mad, considering medicine has been trying to drive cholesterol levels into the ground with inflammatory low-fat, high-carb diets. This is why statins are terrible choices for people with neurodegenerative diseases. The inflammation overwhelms the quality assurance system that ensures proper protein folding, and the end result is the formation of neurofibrillary tangles from insoluble proteins. These insoluble proteins then block the transport of vital ingredients into the brain cells to offset the assault. One of those vital ingredients appears to be cholesterol itself. We now know high insulin levels block LDL cholesterol from entering the brain. It appears repair mechanisms for normal lipid metabolism becomes so imbalanced it induces nerve cells to undergo apoptosis and deplete themselves. This is why, as a neurosurgeon, I see cerebral atrophy on MRI and CT scans in these patients. In my opinion, based on the information we have today, Alzheimer's is a nutritional disorder. When it comes to Alzheimer's, researchers hope we can find ways to attack or block the inflammation, the production of ozone reactions, the conversion of cholesterol to cortisol, and encourage the refolding apparatus that evolution provided. Maybe then we can improve protein solubility and even boost the plaque removal mechanism. I have a much simpler and cheaper idea. Why don't we just stop lighting the match for the dynamite? Maybe we should advocate a ketogenic Paleolithic diet that decreases carbohydrates and lowers omega-6 fatty acids. Since we now know what drives the disease, we know what will slow its progression. Of course, somehow I bet they'd rather make a profitable drug rather than teach people what might really help. After all, no food company makes money unless they are selling the sad, do they? The choice is yours. Chapter 11.